Welcome back. This is season 5, Engaging Culture.
Season 5.
Season 5,
That's
Brandon.
an accomplishment.
Here we are.
Seriously,
Yeah, we kind of just lowered it. First season, we did like 25 episodes, and now we've just been doing 5. So that's why we're at season 5.
Right,
Just
right.
lower your standards.
I love that.
But this is an important topic for a lot of reasons. The reason that we have Brannon Shortt with us here in the studio is because a few, like last year, we got to hear you give this incredible talk on engaging culture to our high school students. And then we got to receive it as a staff.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to questions of what is the right way to live your life with people that don't share your faith, you're my go-to friend.
That means
you're
a lot.
my go-to voice of, I literally channel your voice when I'm thinking about, okay, what would Brandon say to me in this situation?
Man.
So
thank you, Dina.
You're welcome.
I channel your voice in every other conversation. So that means a lot. Seriously.
It's good. And honestly, you shouldn't channel my voice in this conversation because Amy and I share backgrounds. So I don't want to share on your behalf. But for me, I was a homeschooled pastor's kid.
Yeah.
So engaging culture, like I'm like, okay, I just try to stay quiet in my theater classes and not be stupid and not be awkward. And I usually just failed at that. So I have felt so long in this conversation that I want to share the good news.
Yeah.
I want to be light in dark places. I want to be salt to a place that needs to find Jesus.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for this conversation to unfold because I know there are a lot of people who have this question.
Yeah.
And with that, Amy, anything you want to say about yourself and your background?
I feel like you already set me up. Yeah, I've been homeschooled for 7th through 12th grade. I grew up in a Christian family.
Yeah.
I love Jesus, and I love sharing the gospel, and I love sharing, just talking about it. Like I talk about it all the time, and I don't know. I guess I just have questions concerning like if I'm doing it the right way, what I would need to be doing different, or things like that.
And what the audience doesn't know is that you named all 8 planets in our solar system.
That's right.
Off the top of your head before we pushed play on
This
this.
is the homeschool education, guys.
This is the pros of homeschool.
She even quoted the amount of moons a planet had.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you as well, Brendan.
Thank you.
I will add that Amy is our resident. She's like our, hey, let's take that deeper. And let's follow up and make sure we're having this conversation at a biblical level.
Yes.
So you're on this podcast, not only because of our shared backgrounds, but because you have a very sharp mind, a very clear heart for Jesus. And I know when we're getting to the center of what it means to engage culture, you're going to be valuable in this conversation. So,
Yes. A desire to excavate to deeper places.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
Honored to be here.
Brandon, tell us a little bit about your background
Yeah.
and why you're passionate about this conversation.
So grew up in North Carolina, met my wife when I was 15, she was 16, got married at 21, went to 2 separate colleges, also grew up in the church, grew up in a background, however, that while there was so much good to it, I went through a faith wrestle really young. Like I remember cognizantly thinking by the time I was in 6th grade, that I still believed in God. I just could not keep the standard I was being asked to keep. Again, back to the gospel.
Right.
And I couldn't keep it. So I said, I am done trying. And I quit. Like I had this real existential spiritual crisis. And from 11 to 14, honestly, which sounds so young, but I deep end go off the rail for a while in my life. Come back to Jesus at a house party one night when I'm 14 years old. In a place I shouldn't have been, with a crowd I shouldn't have been with, after a season of a lot of like pain, trauma, danger, fighting, trouble, and come back to Jesus, transfer high schools, go to a Christian high school my final few years of high school, which was awesome because I knew I'd had this Spurgeon moment in a lawn outside of that party that night, late into the night, where I like have this, if you can love me where I'm at, and this is actually about your forgiveness and your love of me, then I'm in and I'm sorry and I want to change and I want to be different. Wow. I transfer high schools to get out of where I'm at within the society that I was running in. So that was kind of the turning point moment. Went to college, got a degree in biblical studies, get married at 21, become a pastor at 21, which is wildly young for that role. Went to seminary and theological reasoning. Spent a lot of years in LA. co-wrote in the hip hop department under a producer at Atlantic Records for a lot of years, then became an artist on my own. And so straddling like those 7 years in Southern California were really where this passion, it was happening before then in Tennessee and in North Carolina, but those years in Southern California were really where that passion to engage culture as a believer and hold like the space for that and to be missionally involved in those type of creative spaces. That's where that was really birthed at a level that was burden for me. That was like, I would not want to live with both feet in one world. Like I really feel called. And I use that word intentionally with all the baggage that can come with that word. I feel called to be in both spaces. Yeah. And there's a rundown.
That's so good.
Yeah.
We love the word calling. I feel like all the old words are good words, and old words always have baggage.
Yep.
And that word calling is not exempt from that. And
right.
so I feel like that is the passion that I want to tap into, because even let's dive into that narrative.
Yeah.
Because when you say I have one foot in one world, one foot in another world, I mean, from many youth groups, that is the exact opposite of what we are told to do. Is like, you got to put both feet in the church and the kingdom of God. So, so tell us, as someone who's had to straddle both worlds, why are we called to have a foot in both worlds?
Yeah, at the core, I believe Jesus is renewing all things. So spaces aren't devoid of what Jesus is trying to renew. So for me, there's this very clear, like, even when Paul talks about some of the things that people that would get nervous about that were the quote I used earlier, even people that would get nervous, Paul is saying things like that in very urban cities, saying in the world, not of it, in very core culture creating, culture filled Corinth, Ephesus, Philippi places. Because at the ultimate level, those places aren't devoid of what's being renewed and the kingdom coming on earth as it is in heaven, again, to be small ambassadors of the kingdom in our place and time and history. So, and I think everything is culture. So I don't believe churches are devoid of culture. I don't think that anything is devoid of culture. So engaging it towards renewal, I think you kind of have these two options you've seen, especially in like modern Christian history, that even if we're talking like Christian sociology, there is a definable moment even in like the postmodern West where sociologists will point to a Christian flight out of cultural spaces. And into some places where it could be a little more just us, or a little more protective was what was used a lot, a little more, in the words of a pastor, a little more wear a helmet, make sure you got your goggles on and make sure you don't ever get scraped up. Right. And I just think that God is renewing these places, needs people in the sense of not ultimately, but needs people to be willing to go into those places as transformed people. That Willard line that the greatest thing you offer any room is a transformed self.
That's good.
To walk then into a room at the level and where you are in your own transformation journey now, especially if the rooms that would never walk into ours. I just feel that is like a sacred honor and aligned with what Jesus is saying when he's renewing all things.
That's so good. Wow. You touch on something that Isaac and Emily of Parallel Society talked about in our first couple episodes in this podcast series. And they just talked about the harm of evacuation theology.
Yes.
Just basically saying that a place is dark, therefore Christians need to get out of it.
Right.
Whether that be the arts or, fill in the blank of wherever. It's like, it's just too absent of Jesus. It's too much pressure.
Yeah.
And they kind of just flipped it on us and they're saying, hey, isn't that exactly what the church is called to do? We're supposed to be a light in dark places. So I love that.
I love that. I don't remember if it was Rodney Stark or one of the scholars I was reading was talking about Corinth. He said, the most licentious city in all of Greece. White, hot, passion, fire, sex, art. And he's like going into all of this. And he's like, and Paul observes that and goes, that's where we should go.
Right.
Yeah. Like that's his move, is to move into those places, knowing that Jesus is with him and going to like take over in places in those cities in his renewal.
All right. Turning the mic officially over to Amy.
Do it.
Okay. Amy, take us into this conversation. What questions do you have?
So basically, as believers, we're supposed to be going in the middle of this hot mess, right? The middle of Corinth.
Yeah. I love that it went to hot mess. Yeah.
We gotta get in the middle of this. But if Christians are conforming to this popular secular culture, is that a signifier they're becoming lukewarm or they're doing something wrong? Because we should be in the mess, but not of the mess, right?
Exactly. Like,
Okay.
I think you nailed it when you said conform. I think you can be in those spaces without conforming.
Okay.
So as somebody that, like, I'll talk about writing for other artists. For those first several years, these were artists that I am not legally going to name, but if that camera was off, you would know who they were.
Wow.
And the conversation I had of going into those places with even other pastors that I was working with and for, saying, you're in the room with that artist who writes in this way. And I said, yeah. And I just gave him a Hebrew 6 lyric and he didn't even know it was Hebrew 6.
Wow.
And he's like, what'd you say? I said, if you want to talk about a hope that anchors, come and talk to me. And I threw that into his song. So I'm sitting there like, I don't think space means you have to conform. And then I do think, just to be clear, that there's spaces we should avoid. Like, I don't think it's a throw caution to the wind.
Yeah.
Like, I had somebody ask me this recently of saying, how do you remain in some of these spaces without it affecting where your faith is? And I can't help but like relate it back. I was a college baseball player, so I took a baseball scholarship. That's the only way. Our right arm that threw hard was the only way my 2.6 self at the time got to college. And I would say, like, my baseball IQ people had taught me to use. So I played third base my freshman year of college, and before the play ever started, if there's a man on first base, I would think to myself, if it is hit to my glove side, I'll go glove side below my hip, get it, throw it, second base off the left side of his hip, about 6 inches. He'll go to first with it, double play, and we got about 4.7 seconds based on the average college runner. And I'm thinking all that before the play starts.
Wow.
I have to know what I'm going to do with the ball before the ball ever shows up to me. So when I go into those spaces, I've already made the decisions I'm willing to do and what I'm willing not to do.
So you have to be prepared when you're going in, obviously.
Yeah, like if somebody is in a hip hop studio and offers me an illicit drug, I already know what I'm going to do with that ball before I walk in the room.
Okay.
It's a no.
Right.
I'm not going to go to the club with people that are asking me to go to the club. My wife wouldn't be thrilled about that. I would never do that. These things that align with our worldview, align with our values, and then our unique set of convictions. I think being anchored enough and far enough along in the journey. I'm not saying I would have done this at 15. I'm not saying that would have actually been the wise move. I'm just saying, as I've grown and as we all grow, knowing what you're going to do with the ball before the balls even hit your direction is essential to being able to sustain in those places and not compromise your own conviction and morality.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's so helpful. How do you feel about that tension, Amy, of not conforming? Does that ease any sense of just like, impending danger, avoid it? The hot mess.
It's so hot.
Like hell.
I don't think that I want to avoid it. I want to go about it diligently. And
Yeah.
I feel like for me, I feel like I'm pretty strong in my faith. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I would conform to anything.
Right.
Like, for me, it's like exclamation marks go off in my head. Nope.
Totally.
I think that just comes from having a lot of those beliefs instilled in me as I was like raised up in a Christian family.
Yeah.
So I have like scriptures in the back storage of my memory. So it's like I have stuff that I know. But do you think that it could be dangerous encouraging Christians to go into this hot mess if those Christians are not strong? If they're like,
Sure.
yeah.
Honestly, I tend to think they're already in it. Like, I say this a lot. I think culture's unavoidable. Brokenness is unavoidable. If I was even going to the furthest end of like Eden and living between two gardens, trauma at some level, unavoidable. Like, there's this really sad reality to the brokenness in which we exist. So I do think like there is the temptation to think run or engage, and then holding the kind of going more nuanced where your question is like, could it be dangerous? I think the answer is always it could be dangerous.
It is dangerous.
But I think that, like, honestly, I think that about everything. I think everything could be dangerous. Like, I think getting in my car and driving is dangerous. I think all those things are dangerous. I don't think the Christian call as it pertains to reaching into culture is to avoid it if it's dangerous.
Right.
I think safety, again, there's not a throw to the wind. There's such a tension and balance to be held in the nuance of this. And again, there's places I will avoid. Like I've mentioned some already. Like I'm not walking into some of these spaces being like, oh yeah, I'm in the club as a believer, an ambassador to the kingdom as these people get objectified. Like that would not sit with my own conviction. But I think there's a real reality too, if you can speak to desire. So when I look at culture, what I often say is amidst the danger, amidst the white hot flaming passion that there is in culture, like amidst all of that, if you can speak to desires, then you can speak to the culture. Because I do think if desires are good, and not all our desires are, like we have demented desires, we've got tons of Bible about the like ultimate lies of our lives and our own flesh. But where desire is good, I think good desire always finds home in Jesus' kingdom. I think all of them do, if they're good. Or even the root of some demented desires that are good even amidst that, like that it's good gone wrong. I think there's still avenues to Christ in those places. So if you can speak to that, I think you can speak to culture, even though, there's danger for sure. But I find it way more dangerous, way more, the evacuate theology. I find that, like, I had a boss when I first started in ministry. The first job I ever had, he told me if all my friends were Christian, I was fired. That was his line. And I'm not sure he would have like fired me and like took like all our resources to live away for it. But that was his point. He was like, where in the world does the Bible like give a check mark to only being around people who are already transformed? And Jesus and Paul, Peter, I mean, we could go on forever, but like, I just don't see that being the way for a Christian. So I find that way more dangerous.
Interesting that you bring that up. I remember you brought up in staff meeting, if all my friends are Christians and you're fired. Here's the thing, Brandon. All my friends are Christians, so I should probably be fired.
You can leave the podcast now.
Or instead of fired. I gave that same example that as I increasingly, especially like being a lead pastor now, getting to be in some of these other spaces, honestly, like traveling and doing some stuff like that, the more that happens, the easier it is for my world to only be Christians. So I find these very small moments in my life where I can't avoid non-believers. So that's my intentionality. Like I made that joke in staff meeting. I will not go to a God-believing barber. I won't. Like Daylani and Cash and all the good, very much more affordable barbers, I won't go to them. They believe in Jesus.
Well, they're fine.
So I literally, and they're awesome, but I would much rather say, no, at least this hour and a half a month, I'm going to be with somebody in that chair while we're having really intentional conversations about life in that chair with somebody that doesn't know Jesus. And then like on the softball team in our city, like I won't play on our church team. I only play on the city team. And then I do have the avenue of music where very few people I work with in that space are believers. A few of them are, but very few of them are. But I think it's not, I wouldn't take it as extreme as him. I loved his line because it drove the point home. But I think if we're looking societally, there are, now by name and practice, again, I'm not trying to split those hairs, but I think there are so many people around who do not believe that it would be hard for us not to just accidentally run into them, and then be really intentional about making friends in certain spaces within our life rhythms to make sure that we're not just engulfed in this. So that's always my advice, is find the little places.
That's really good. Now I'm thinking about it, like next time we need to go get a haircut, I just should have conversations with them.
It won't take you long to find out if a barber is a Christian or not.
No, it's like finding those pockets of opportunity, I think. So,
and being intentional to go after them. Like I think the quickest way to get away from people different than us is to be unintentional about going to places that they are.
Intentionality is key.
It's it. It's literally it. It would be so easy for me to say, with my life, our rhythms, these roles, these responsibilities in this season, I am only around Christians or around non-Christians from a stage, but not in relationship with them. So I just think it's intentionally finding the places you can be.
So how do you think I can intentionally spread the gospel in a loving way that isn't going to give me the label of, oh, she's a Christian who just wants to talk about her Jesus, and I don't know, because people that you get labeled that a lot, like even and it's like, oh, she talks about his Jesus, and she's gonna start praying for them right there. It's like, I don't want to be like that, but my heart's there, Yeah.
Well, I would compliment your zeal and the desire that you have to speak about love that's changed your life through Christ. I have found it very effective for me. And again, to Dina's point, there's some leaders in the world that would get a little nervous about what I'm about to say, but I mean this. Like I mean this at a conviction level. I tend not to start on the Roman road of evangelism. I usually don't try to get somebody.
So like you're a sinner, right? You agree, right?
Right. You've hated somebody, right? So you might as well have murdered them.
Yeah, exactly. And you're definitely going to hell. So
and you're definitely,
let's start there.
Like, the fire, blood, and brimstone, right?
And I'm trying like to not shade any. I just honestly, in the cities in which I have existed, the last 3 weeks is the first time in my adult life I have not lived in an urban core. The last 3 weeks. Which has been quite a shift for me, I'll be honest. I'm like, I can't walk anywhere. Trader Joe's is not here anymore. And like, there's not these street side taco stand. Like, where am I? Folsom is the answer. And I love it. And it's good in its own ways and beautiful and amazing. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. But I've always lived in the city and in the urban core of those places. Paul and Jesus doing like as they go is while the message is the same. Like the gospel is not a changing story.
Yeah.
The methods are changed everywhere they go. That Paul talks about, I become like them. Like I become all things to all people in order to win some. He speaks different in Athens than he does in Corinth. And he's doing that based on culture. Like the Old Testament, Jesus, I mean, even to like Bethany and water into wine and ritual cleansing ceremony, all of this is still tied into culture. So for me, what I look at first is what's the desire. So the story I tell a lot is I went hiking with a dude in LA who is high on a tree that he is smoking while he's walking amidst the trees. Okay. So he's high for sure. Smoking weed, walking through this forest. And he is coming to me talking about how, hey man, I just believe in nature. I just believe in the creation. Do you know this about trees and their root systems and how leaves are nutrient? Like they get their nutrients by going through this stem, and the stem is reached out like this and it looks so broad. And he's giving me all of this love of nature stuff. My first move is do not worship creation.
Right.
Worship the creator. That's not my first move. My first move was, man, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like the heartbeat behind why you love the world, why you love nature, why the sea and the trees and the clouds and the birds seem to speak to you. It makes so much sense. And he's like, well, what? And he opens the door. He goes, so what do you believe? Because again, there's already been a safe bridge.
Ooh, okay, so you established like a common ground. Okay.
Yeah. And like he didn't feel beat up. So like I hit him immediately with, that makes so much sense to me. Actually, in what I believe as a Christian was that God, even at the very beginning, says he puts us in a garden and then sets us over dominion, meaning to take care and live in harmony with all created things. There is nobody that should care about our environment and these trees and their preservation and what is in the ocean and how animal life is held and taken care of in a natural order than us. And I told him, I said, it makes so much sense to me that Jesus sits on a hillside one day and looks at them and says, when everything in the world is becoming overwhelming to you, actually look at the birds. Look at them. Actually, I'll tie what your Father does for you to things you can actually see. And I saw that dude come to Jesus, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months later.
Wow.
But it was because, like, I think if you start with your evangelism and culture engagement from the good desire that's being manifest, even if it's being manifest in ways we don't agree with, then the inroad to the kingdom is easy.
Oh, it's the good desire of the other person.
Was his,
Okay. I'm sorry, I was confused the whole time you were talking about desire. Okay,
like his desire was for the created things. And to be able to, like, empathize and, like, meet him in that place as a believer from the truth of us. Like, I've seen that even in, like, big controversial topics. Like I've seen people come to Jesus when they found out that Isaiah says, treat the foreigner as if they're your brother.
Yeah.
And I've seen people, that was their inroad to Christ. I saw like when Rodney Stark, I think, was the one who said the church is the first real universal community in the world, where that wasn't inherently groupish.
Yeah.
There was men and women and children of different races and places and times and socioeconomic and education levels, not branched off into these camps. And then especially in your generation and ours, like there's so much literal visible desire that we would be together. I think if we hit the beginning inroads of the kingdom, that their desire can find home there, then that's actually my first step to the gospel. Personally. Again, I get why people would say, well, you have to acknowledge your sin. You do.
Yeah.
At some point on the road. I just don't want to never get there because I told them, well, you murdered your brother the other day when you said you hated him.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So I go at desire when it comes to engaging the culture.
That's so helpful. All right, here's your homework, because I love assigning homework and everyone hates receiving it, but I love doing it. You have 2 pieces of homework, Amy and everyone listening, including Dina. One is to really ask yourself the question, who do I know that doesn't know Jesus?
Yes.
And if you're struggling to come up with an answer, start brainstorming what are some ways that I can meet them, not for the sake of converting them, but for the sake of just loving them, of going out and spreading the love of Jesus.
That reminds me exactly what Kurt was talking today in D-Time about
What was
his wife, who is like the most evangelical.
Kelly, the best.
Yeah.
So fun. Yeah, she's just famous for, like, she converts so many people to Christianity. She brings so many people to faith because she bakes a lot of chocolate chip cookies. And she's just really good at meeting people's needs. So, yeah,
take
Kelly
up a
Harlow.
new favorite pastime of baking.
Yeah. So, who can I talk to that doesn't know Jesus? Not for the sake of converting them, because then it's something for us and like our record, but honestly, just for the sake of loving them.
Right.
And second, become familiar with people's desires.
Yeah.
Start asking questions. What do you value? What do you care about most in this world?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Literally, like, if you can, I use this phrase a lot. I think, Dina, I think we've said this before together. If you can hear what's being said beyond the words being used, everything changes. If all you can hear is words and you can't hear desires and you can't hear longings, people put their desires and longings in many different words.
Yes.
And some you might like, and some you might be offended by. Some may be more passionate, and some may be more subdued. But if you can get to the point discerningly and prayerfully that you can hear hearts, you can hear desires, you can hear pain. I love that you said the love piece. Like, I was being so tactful in that. And I talking about actually hitting some of these other places that we can't forget. Like, that's literally it. Like, I could go on longer and longer, but yeah, I do think, like, if it's not just loving them for the sake of they are another person made in the image of God, then we've missed the why and the initial step to begin with, which is quite dangerous.
So good.
Yeah.
I want to close with this story that has always inspired me, because I feel like it perfectly illustrates everything you've been calling us to do, Brannon. And it's just one of my all-time favorite stories of this church leader who basically, when the fall of Rome was happening, so like Roman society was collapsing. It was a really hot mess, but no one thought it was hot anymore in a good way. Everyone was just like, this is just a mess. This is a really bad mess. And so Christians, like everyone in the city, not just Christians, everyone was fleeing the city because it was collapsing all around them. And famously, there was this one particular church pastor who decided, I'm going to go be a monk and I'm going to live with Jesus people. And I'm going to go study Jesus things, and I'm going to have a great life of intimacy with the Lord. And there's this story of basically the church in Rome. They voted and they were like, it's got to be this guy. This is the guy that needs to lead us out of this mess.
Yeah.
And so they went, and to read his description, they literally pulled him, had to physically remove him from the desert spaces and bring him back into the city.
Yeah.
And ultimately he submitted to it, and it was like, okay, like I'm here, I'm back, I'm in the city. I received this call not to flee, not to evacuate, but to stay and to help. And he called himself, I am the servant of the servants of God. And this is Pope Gregory. And he's just this incredible story to me of, sometimes I just want to flee the mess. Sometimes I just want to go hang out with my Christian friends because we talk about the same things. We share the same. We have the same language, and I'm not as awkward around them. But I can't remember that the world is broken and it needs Jesus. And and so sometimes I think of that image as, man, Dina needs to be pulled into the hot messes of the world because that's where Jesus is needed. So with that, I want to encourage you to keep listening to this series. Brannon's going to be coming on in a couple of episodes, but next episode, we are having Jennifer Jackson. She's my sister. She's incredible. She is an artist who has lived this out. She's a professional actress, and she has lived firsthand what it means to be a Christian in a hard place, an often dark place, but man, just to hear her stories of the way that God has helped her to stay faithful to who he is and to the gospel, but to reach people, not always to convert people, but even just to share a little bit of love, to share a little bit of truth. Do not miss that episode with Jen. It's coming up next.
Sounds exciting.
Love it.